May 1075. John Hancock chairing, not their first choice. A rather arrogant fellow, very rich, powdered wigs and velvet suits woven in gold thread. He's more like a British or European aristocrat than an American colonist. It is a pure Hollywood myth that they all had wigs on in here. If you go down to the portrait gallery, it's open, it's a wonderful thing. If you go in there, you will see that almost none of them are actually wearing wigs. So the real work gets done out here. By the way, the rising sun chair is not there yet, as we call it. It shows up a few years later. Hancock sits on something else. Thomas Jefferson said that John Dickinson of Pennsylvania, well, he said that he was a junior companion to the labors of John Dickinson. Mr. Dickinson is a great Pennsylvania patriot, American patriot, but in here, when it comes to the question of independence, he votes no. Too much, too soon, too fast. You can be an anti-independence patriot. There are subtle differences. But when it came, he proved his chops. He fought out here at the Battle of the Brandywine in uniform with General Washington. 225 years ago, at this moment, he's in this room helping to write the Constitution of the United States. So, he has a college named after him. But the man that Thomas Jefferson said was the Atlas of independence, the key man, the father of independence. You can look all over in this great nation of ours and you will find no national memorial to him. It shows how myths can be problematic. And that, of course, is John Adams of Massachusetts. He talks about independency in here so much that he writes to his wife that he becomes obnoxious, suspect, and unpopular, that a Virginian must appear to be at the head of this business. And we know what Virginian he's talking about, Mr. Jefferson. Appeared. Indeed, Adams is unpopular not because he's against independence, but because he's for it. Most of the people in here were still agreeing with Dickinson. Slow down. They're quite willing to be rebels. George Washington is made general here, a rebel general, takes up command June 16, 1775, of an army that exists only on paper, but they're not quite willing to become revolutionaries. Indeed. They send out the first of two declarations, the Declaration of Causes and Necessities of Taking Up Arms. Declarations are announcements, remember, statements. But they also balance it with the famous Olive Branch Petition, the first of 4 documents signed in this room, key documents. Thomas Jefferson wrote it. It wasn't good enough. John Dickinson rewrote it, and they signed it. They sent it off to the king. And it says, in effect, we wish to continue to love our king as we do. And here are some proposals to restore harmony to the empire, to deal with this problem of the weakening of our legislatures here. But, you know, every British monarch feels the weight of the sword on the back of their neck after Charles I. King George's interests lie with Parliament. They put his family on the throne, remember. They can take him off. Not here. So he does reject them. He does declare open rebellion, and he sets the question. The die is now cast. The colonists will either submit or they will be free. No compromise. So indeed, Mr. Dickinson is embarrassed by this, and John Adams has his day. He and his allies, there are others, no doubt, but Adams is the leader. He's given the high honor of the last great speech before they vote the question, which is the resolution of independence. Resolved, these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. Yes or no? Adams mesmerized them. He's probably the greatest lawyer in American history. He's a brilliant orator. In a moderate length speech of about 2 hours, he summed up the case. And indeed, they voted yes. Now they're revolutionaries, because they're talking about independency and what we would call human rights, beyond the rights of Englishmen. That's the most important choice ever made in American history. In this deep crisis, it's our Independence Day in this room, July 2nd, 1776. It's not the 4th of July. What happens is they have another announcement, the Declaration of Independence, to explain the vote. They look at Mr. Jefferson's draft and they rejected it. 2.5 days of serious editing. So the announcement says July 4th on it, but if we're not going to celebrate the day of the actual vote, I think maybe we should celebrate the 8th, because that's when you and I found out about it. This park does nothing to celebrate the 4th of July. Things happen here, but what we do is we do what happened. We read the Declaration out in the square on the 8th every year of July. So, oh, and by the way, it's signed here, the second document, August 2nd, 1776. Remember the 2nd of July, one of the great days of human history, because General Washington and the Army are willing to sacrifice themselves, if necessary, in this crisis for these principles that these folks are talking about here. The risk to improve the world. Well, the war is long, it's 8 years long. The only time there to say about it is it's a stinging loss for the British. But when they go home, what do we have? Under the third document signed here, which is the Articles of Confederation, there's no union. They call it that, but there's no union. The Articles of Confederation is a firm league of friendship. But to borrow a pun, it's neither firm a league nor very friendly. Indeed, they're at each other's necks. Europe is laughing at this chaos here. Pennsylvania fought a war with Connecticut. The Wyoming Valley War up near Scranton. It's small, but it's real. And that's why, two more names, Alexander Hamilton, this dark, abandoned orphan genius that comes here and rises. Mr. Hamilton and James Madison, planter's son, brilliant scholar. They bring the Constitutional Convention. Literally 225 years ago, they're in this room now. And Hamilton brings the energy of genius. Madison has some plans. He has a notebook. For an ancient meeting, it's brilliantly well documented. I commend you to those notes. But they each know they can't do it without George Washington. Remember, King George said he was the greatest man in the world. Tells you something about both men. Why? Well, at the end of the war, Washington insisted upon resigning as general. He insisted upon it. Nobody took his stars away. He gave them back. Think about it. Revolutionary leaders don't walk away from power. Cromwell didn't do it before him in England. Bonaparte doesn't do it in France afterwards. But Washington understood the principle. If you have a rights-based society, the greatest component of freedom is responsibility. And Washington is showing this, and he's showing that if rights come first, there has to be a necessary first condition of government. What is it? What is the first necessary condition of government if rights come first? Well, they knew. Government must be limited. And that's exactly what George Washington is symbolizing. He doesn't want to be here. They dragged him out of retirement to sit there. But if you will, thank God he comes, because this is a brutal need. We agree that power must be limited, but what we never agree upon, what is our great national debate, if you will, and even a war fought over it, where are the limits? And this is the primal debate, trying to decide all of these balances. Madison's notes explain them in detail. It got so bad, the radicals of the left walked out of here. And those are the small government people, remember, the anti-federalists. 2 of the 3 New Yorkers left. Hamilton is alone. He's not even a quorum any longer. But when they turn and they look, the general is still in the chair. Mr. Washington is here. The great moral force of the time does not lead. The center holds, and they get to what they need to do if there's going to be a union. Hard, harsh, and brutal compromise. And with that, it's in details, clearly, they sign a constitution here, September 17th in the year 1787. And just as John Adams does not get a national memorial, we don't celebrate September 17th. But this is the world's oldest written national constitution approved by the people, the beginning of this process of modern rights-based constitutional government. It's a modest little building, but the events echo out of this room from that time to this day. And there's always something you can learn about how to deal with a crisis by looking at these meetings and the other things that occur. With that, they're going to need to come in.